Hi there, folks. Well, December is nearly upon us, and that means only one thing. It is time for my annual winter list of recommended books. And this year, I have sourced 10 books for you. 10! A couple of them are short stories, a couple of them are children's books. But I have tried very hard not to repeat myself from the last two winter lists over the last couple of years. There's only one book in this list that I repeated that I also talked about a couple of years ago, and it's such a good one. But what I'm going to do, because there are some books that just need to be mentioned, before I start my main list, I'll just mention some of the books that I've mentioned before in the winter list. Bring them to your memory. And at the end of this video, I'll put up a link to last year's list so that you can go and have a look at those as well. Are you joining us? There we go. Oh, off she goes. So you're going to sit there, are you? All right then. And here's my co-host Tilly. Now, some of these books for this year I've chosen because they have a particularly wintry setting or they are set in winter. A couple of them are sort of just very kind of chilling storylines and partly set in winter or a sort of icy atmosphere as well. And but I'll explain each reason as I talk about the book. Just before we start then, just a mention of some of the wintry books that I've mentioned before in past years, which are just perennials for me and a great book to read in winter. And there's The Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher, who which I've mentioned several times, and I know many of you love that book. There's Winter Ghosts by Kate Moss, Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, the whole His Dark Materials series, and of course we mustn't forget The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, the classic children's novel, my favourite children's novel of all time, along with all the other Narnia books. And I've also previously mentioned books like The Nine Tailors by Dorothy L. Sayers, The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, Titus Groan, Mervyn Peake, marvellous book, and Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. So those are a few good winter books that I've mentioned in the past. Just to get started, as usual, I always start with the earliest published book on my list. And my first one was published in 1818. I've chosen this book not so much because it's particularly set in winter, although a lot of it is, but just for its kind of chilling subject matter. And it's a good one to get stuck into over winter anyway. And it was by a young woman who was only 19 years old. I think you'll guess what it is. Of course, it's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. What an extraordinary young woman Mary Shelley was. Born, of course, Mary Wollstonecraft, the daughter of the other Mary Wollstonecraft, who was one of the first females to write about the rights of women. And of course, then the young Mary was then married to the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. But what a highly intelligent, deep thinker Mary Shelley must have been. I can't imagine having written anything so extraordinary at that age. I can't imagine writing anything this extraordinary at my age, but let alone 19. At the age of 19, I was just out partying most of the time. So, total respect, basically. So, of course, in case you don't know, there was a very wintry, low in the sky sun shining through the window, which was a bit blinding. It's a lovely day today, but it's very cold. So, of course, in case you don't know, Frankenstein, the titular character of the book, is, of course, the scientist Victor Frankenstein, who carries out an experiment to see if he can create something made up of parts of predeceased human body parts. And the creature he creates is so horrific, he abandons it, whereby the poor, lonely, ugly, horrifying being that he has created, this sentient being, seeks revenge and sets out to murder Frankenstein's loved ones. For such a person at such a young age to write about something so incredibly poignant, at the same time horrific and deeply psychological, is just incredibly extraordinary. And much of it, some of it at the beginning, I think, and at the end, is told in letter form by a character called Captain Robert Walton, who sets out to find Victor Frankenstein and where he has disappeared to. And this this is partly why I've chosen this for this list, is that Frankenstein has disappeared into the Arctic territory. So you do get some very wintry scenes. I think what really is amazing about this book, when you consider it's from a very young writer, is the fact that she's not just written a horror story about a monster. She's written a horror story about a monster that we end up caring about. And that is what makes this story one of the best horror books of all time, if not the best. If I have to choose between Frankenstein and Dracula, I tend to choose Dracula, but this does come a close second. And if you've never read Frankenstein, you really, really ought to. So why not give it a go this winter, curled up in front of a fire, if possible. Now, as book lovers, it's very difficult to get through winter and Christmas without either reading or hearing about Charles Dickens. Now, I'm not going to talk about the most obvious one here. I did talk about that in a Christmas video I did, I think, a year ago. And, of course, I am going to be uploading my part one of my recording of A Christmas Carol. That is going to be live on Wednesday the 3rd of December, so that's coming up very soon. But I thought I'd talk about one of Dickens' other Christmas books. Because after the success of A Christmas Carol, he went on to write several more short stories for the Christmas period. None of them were ever quite as popular as A Christmas Carol. But the one that was, you might say, second favourite was called The Cricket on the Hearth. It was published in 1843. And it's in this compilation book of Dickens's Christmas short stories. And this is called A Christmas Carol and Other Christmas Books. And so here is The Cricket on the Hearth, or subtitled A Fairy Tale of Home. And here's a lovely illustration at the start of that story. And by the way, if you can hear this sort of slightly chewy grinding sound in the back, Tilly has gone off in a huff because I've told her it's not actually dinner time yet. So she's gone off to go and have a go at one of her long-lasting chews. So if you can hear that sound in the background, my apologies. So the cricket on the hearth, come on then. Yeah, just to prove me wrong. Yeah. You've left your tube behind now, have you? Okay. The cricket on the hearth is about a happy married couple who have a baby. And at the opening of the story, they are very cosily and happily sitting in their front room with a fire in the fireplace and a cricket on the hearth chirping away happily. And the cricket on the hearth is very symbolic of the couple's happiness and what happens. The conflict starts when a mysterious stranger comes to the house and kind of starts to manipulate the couple. He undermines their confidence in each other by talking about the age difference between them. There's a couple of other subplots involving a malicious toy maker, of all things, jealous, cruel toy maker who plans to marry May Fielding, who is actually the sweetheart of Edward Plummer, the son of another toy maker. Caleb Plummer, Edward's father, also has a blind daughter, Bertha. And to protect Bertha from the world around her, Caleb has created illusions for her, deceptions to make her think that everything around is perfect and beautiful. And this, of course, leads to complications and to disappointments. But it is the magic, the cricket on the hearth, sort of household fairy that somehow manages to bring all of these stories to a positive conclusion. It's a very strange little story. Some people find it over sentimental, and I know, Dickens certainly can be over sentimental at times, but it's a Christmas story. It's meant to be warm and full of goodwill at the end, with the couple again sitting very happily together with the cricket on the hearth. So if you've not read any of Charles Dickens' other Christmas stories at all, then that's a one to go on to. And of course there are several others. There in this book there is also we have The Chimes and The Battle of Life and The Haunted Man. And apart from all his novels, Dickens wrote a lot of other things, little articles, little sort of essays on his observations of life, which one of which I'm reading through at the moment. And I love those. So there's so much of Dickens to read. So definitely, if you're a fan of Dickens, have a look at his short stories and other stuff as well. Now, my next book, it was published in 1869. It's a very, very long book. It's previously serialised before it was actually published as a full book. It's in 4 parts with a 2-part epilogue. And it's a Russian classic. I think you've guessed by now that this is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Now, I haven't got a copy of this book. I read it in my 20s. I borrowed a friend's copy. It took me quite a long time to read it. It is, I think, one of the longest books in literature, maybe the longest. It's certainly thought of as one of the best works of literature ever. And I've included it because there's a lot of the book, particularly in book 4, which covers Napoleon's disastrous retreat from Moscow during the terrible Russian winter of 1812. And of course, the whole story of War and Peace covers the stories of 5 families throughout this war period from 1805, the Napoleonic Wars. One of the main characters is Pierre Bezukhov, who at the start of the novel is this rather very unconfident, bumbling sort of person who falls in love with one of the other main characters, Natasha Rostova. When he suddenly gets an inheritance and becomes very rich, suddenly he becomes very eligible. His love of Natasha is one of the ongoing themes and storylines of the novel too, so that's always going on underneath. And of course, poor Pierre also gets caught up in the terrible retreat from Moscow later on. There is all the historical detail of the Napoleonic Wars, and then all the convoluted interweavings of these 5 different families. Now, as I say, I read it in my 20s. I'm not going to go through all these plots very much. I can't remember. But there was also a very good television series, maybe about 10 years ago, which I also watched. But of course, it's a historical novel because Tolstoy was writing it long after the dates of the events that it talks about. It's also a very philosophical novel. It brings out themes of the nature of war, of power and history, and how all these things reflect in and affect the main characters of the story. What an epic it is. It's one of those books, I think, you read it once and it's quite not an easy book to read, I think, probably for a second time or more because it is so long. But it's one of those books that once read, it kind of stays with you. And it is an extraordinary book. But it has those incredible harsh wintry scenes towards the end as the French army retreats from Moscow, which of course Pierre gets caught up in as well. So we get a very personalised account of that in those very wintry scenes. So another one very good for reading over winter while you're curled up in front of a fire. Right. Got a cup of tea, a couple of biscuits, Earl Grey tea. I've drawn the curtains, put my salt lamp on. Things are getting cosy. Now, last year in winter, I read one of Robert Louis Stevenson's short stories. Now, I read one of his stories for Halloween, of course, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But he wrote several other short stories, Jekyll and Hyde being the most well-known, of course. This is my book of Robert Louis Stevenson's short stories. And last year I read an extraordinary one called Markheim. It's set on Christmas Day. And it's very dark. It's quite eerie and has a theme of murder and dark psychology, you might say. I don't want to tell you too much of the plot. Being a short story, it's quite difficult to tell you much of it without revealing spoilers. But basically, the main character, Markheim, enters a shop on Christmas Day. The shops were open on Christmas Day then, but this shop was closed. And he talks to the owner of the shop and tells him he's looking for a gift for his fiancée. But while the shop owner's back is turned, Markheim murders him and then goes upstairs to the living quarters above the shop to try and find some money because he's trying to set up his own business. Now, something then very supernatural happens. Markheim discovers that there is somebody else in the house who approaches him, but this being is a supernatural being. And he basically kind of starts making Markheim question, we might say question his life choices, really. I'm not going to go any further than that, but I actually couldn't put this down. I'm quite surprised that this little short story is not as well known as Jekyll and Hyde. It has that same sort of dark psychology of Jekyll and Hyde, and it's actually very creepy at times as Markheim is going through this dark building where he's just murdered somebody and hearing these creaking steps and doors opening, not knowing whether he's the only one there. But if you like a little bit of horror or darkness for your winter or Christmas read, then there's a really good one, Markheim. Have a look at that and see what you think. Now, my next book is a children's book, and I happen to have my own very own 1960s copy here. If you're looking for a classic book for a child at Christmas, or you just like reading children's books anyway, this is a great one for Christmas. It's set during the Christmas holidays. Starts out as Kay was coming home for the Christmas holidays after his first term at school. The train stopped at Musborough Station. So this is The Box of Delights by John Masefield, and it was published in 1935. It's perfect for Christmas. So it tells the story of this young boy called Kay. He's coming home for the Christmas holidays. He loses his ticket at the train station for the onward journey. And a man and a dog appear, and the man says, "Oh, your ticket's right there on the ground." There's something a little bit magical happening. And this man turns out to be a magician who entrusts him with this box called the Box of Delights, which he discovers has the power to make him small, to make him fast, and to help make him time travel. He also finds that he has the mission of protecting this box from an evil wizard called Abner Brown. And so from this you get a series of wonderful magical adventures with lots of different characters, including a mouse and other magical creatures. And they end up having to basically save Christmas. So there you go. That's such a delightful one for Christmas. For any child or grown-up, I think. I wouldn't mind reading it again and seeing how I enjoy this after all this time. I was probably around 10 the last time I read it. But I've kept it as one of my best books. You can see it's pretty well thumbed. So yeah, I always liked books that had this magical quality when I was little. So yeah, great one for Christmas. Now my next book is also a children's book, and I loved these books as a child. Unfortunately, I don't have any copies. I think I may have got them all from the library when I was little. They were very kind of weird and quirky, and I loved them. And the one I want to talk about is Moominland Midwinter by Tove Jansson. I believe that is the correct Scandinavian pronunciation. Now, because I only got these from the library, I probably only read them about once, but they've stayed with me. I just remember the feel of them. The one I remember most of all, though, is Comet in Moominland, which is about an approaching comet that's going to hit Earth. And it's kind of scary. But I just loved it as well. And I love these illustrations where each illustration you see the comet coming closer and closer. But if you've never read the Moomin books, they're just amazing. This incredible creation by Tove Jansson, and the Finnish writer. These sort of strange kind of white blobby creatures, a family of creatures, because of course there is Moomin Troll and there's Moomin Mama and there's Moomin Papa and there's all Moomin Troll's strange little friends, and they just have adventures. And Moominland Midwinter, of course, is set in winter. Now, Moomins usually hibernate over winter, but in this book, for some reason, Moomin Troll wakes up and can't get back to sleep again, and he's all alone. And, of course, outside, the world is covered with snow, which he has never seen before. And so he has to deal with loneliness and fear, and he has to make some new friends. There's a character called Two Ticky in the book, but he also finds one of his old friends, Little Mai, and they somehow get through the winter. They are great books. Now, again, if you're looking for some classic children's books as a gift for Christmas, then I think the Moomin books would be absolutely lovely. They're completely timeless, and I just love them. I think they've become popular again, because for a long period of time I didn't really hear much about them, and then suddenly over the last 10 years I've heard more about them. I mean, I go into shops and you can buy Moomin mugs and Moomin cards and all kinds of little gifty things. So they've obviously become more popular again. But they're lovely little heartwarming stories of these strange little creatures. And I just absolutely loved them as a child. And I'm sure they'd be lovely to read as an adult as well. So there you go, Moominland Midwinter. Great story for any child or adult to read over the winter period. Now, next is a book that I have mentioned before in my winter list, and I'm unapologetically going to talk about it again because it's just so good. Published in 1969 by one of the best science fiction writers. This is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. I've chosen this because it has a very wintry setting, especially in the last half of the book. And in fact, the planet on which it is set is actually called Winter. So it's set in this completely fictional world of planetary alliances, and involves a character who comes to Winter to try to get this planet to join in a kind of a federation of planets. And sounds a bit Star Trek, doesn't it? He finds that on this planet, the people, the Gethanians, that's the alternative name of the planet is Gethan, are ambisexual. So they are one gender for most of the time, and then at certain times they switch gender so that they can procreate. The main character, a man called Genly I, has to come to terms with this. It's because it's all very, very different to what he understands. And it kind of creates this barrier to communication, and this very, very different culture means that it makes it very difficult for him to break through these barriers and understand these people. But he gradually builds a relationship with one of these people called Estraven, and they go on a very long, dangerous journey across this icy, very icy landscape. And they develop this deep friendship and relationship. And, Genly kind of gradually comes to terms with the nature of Estraven's gender and his relationship with him. It's an extraordinary novel. Now, of course, Ursula Le Guin was a great feminist of her time. Sadly, we lost her a few years ago. So she really explores these themes in this, quite early period for this, 1969. She explores these themes of gender and gender fluidity in a, sort of very radical for the times and very forward thinking. And this became a real classic. It's won several awards. And with the main character having to overcome his fear and mistrust of people of different cultures, it says so much about what was happening in the world when she wrote this and what is happening in the world now, and how it's so important that we come to understand people of different cultures and different ways of life. It's such an important book. It's not just some old science fiction book. This is a book that when I read it, it's not an easy read, very dense in parts. And I've said this before and I must say it again. When I finished reading it, it was like I had a sort of long pause where I had to kind of go over it in my head, and I just felt like I'd experienced something very, very important and significant. And I was so glad I read it. So there you go. Definitely a great one to read in winter with its very wintry and icy setting, but a great one to read at any time for its really important themes. So there you go, The Left Hand of Darkness by the wonderful Ursula Le Guin. Now, the next book I have to talk about now, because of its very, very icy setting, is one that I very recently reviewed. So I won't go too much into it, but you might like to see my review of it just about 3 or 4 weeks ago. This is The Terror by Dan Simmons, and it was published in 2007. Now, if you haven't seen my review of this, if you don't know the book, this is the fictional account of the doomed Franklin expedition to the Arctic to try and find the Northwest Passage. Now, it's extremely well researched historically. It's got all the characters, all the main people who were in that expedition, but he also introduces a bit of supernatural. So what happened with this expedition? This is the historical part. There were 2 ships that carried out this expedition, and it was 1845 they set out. And the 2 ships, the Erebus and the Terror, get stuck in the ice, which was expected to some extent over the winter period. But that particular year and the following year, in the summer period, the ice didn't melt. So these ships got stuck there for 2 more years and more. And this tells the story of that terrible experience stuck. There's I think it's, can't remember exactly how many men there were. I think it's just under 200. And all the terrible things they had to go through. So not just the cold, but also, and this is historical fact too, they found that the food supplies, some of the food supplies had deteriorated, were contaminated. So they have dwindling food supplies. The ships are being crushed by the ice. There's the danger of disease, particularly scurvy, horrible disease. And there's also some unpleasant characters that cause some bad blood between the men too. But apart from all that, Simmons also introduces this other terror, this strange giant kind of creature that is stalking the ships, stalking the men, and is attacking them, taking them away, eating them. So you've got a bit of everything. So it's a mix of historical fiction and horror, and and a little bit of fantasy. And he also brings in Inuit mythology as well. There are some Inuit. There is one in particular Inuit character in it as well that they have encountered. They abandon the ships at one point and go walking on the ice, trying to find a place where they can get back to some civilization. But if you know anything about this particular historical expedition, you'll know that didn't work out. So it's a chilling book. And as I said in my review, it certainly is not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of graphic detail, but it's absolutely fascinating. But you do need to keep warm while you're reading this book, because it's cold. It's cold all the way through. I mean, we're talking about temperatures of -60 at some point. So, yeah. And historically, it's fascinating, and he tells the story brilliantly. So I do recommend it, but as I say, it's pretty graphic. So, it comes with a warning. There you are, The Terror by Dan Simmons. Now, my next book, it's not a particularly wintry book. It's not particularly set in winter, but it's another historical novel. And I think I've chosen it just because I think it's just a really great one to get stuck into over the winter period or over the Christmas holidays. If you haven't read it before and you want to get into this trilogy, this is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And I absolutely loved this book, loved. And I then immediately read the sequel, which is Bring Up the Bodies. I haven't read The Mirror and the Light, which is the last one. I haven't brought myself to do that yet, although I have watched the television series. I'll talk about that in a minute. So, Wolf Hall is, of course, the story. And it's Hilary Mantel's take on the character of Thomas Cromwell, who history has painted as rather a negative character, kind of a bit of a thug, who was instrumental in the downfall of Anne Boleyn. But she paints him in a very different light. So she creates a much more complex man, a much more sympathetic character in Thomas Cromwell. A man who was, he was the right-hand man of Henry VIII for many years. And, with Henry VIII being the tyrant that he was, there wasn't much he could do to go against Henry once Henry had made up his mind about something. So she paints him as this very thoughtful, quite philosophical man who is caught up in the politics of the time. Wolf Hall begins with the downfall of Cardinal Wolsey, and so Thomas Cromwell really kind of takes his place in Henry VIII's favour, and it covers the whole period of Anne Boleyn and Henry's break with Rome, of course. She has her own particular style. It takes a little while to get used to that. I mean, I found once I'd kind of got into the way she wrote, sadly we lost her not so long ago, I found it very, very difficult to put down. It's a book that covers a very, very difficult time in British history with this terrible, Henry VIII himself was incredibly fascinating, horrific, narcissistic, and yet charismatic character who we remember right through history. Probably one of England's most written about, talked about, filmed about monarchs ever. I think the fact that this is about Thomas Cromwell, who was the closest man to Henry VIII at this terrible time, it makes this really, really fascinating itself to explore the character of somebody who is basically having to keep in favour with this king and try and keep his own integrity at the same time. It makes it a really, really fascinating read. And of course, then it's followed by Bring Up the Bodies and The Shadow and the Light. Now, the television series that was on over the last few years was absolutely excellent, with the marvellous, wonderful Mark Rylance playing Thomas Cromwell. Just such a sublime performance. And I had to steel myself to watch the last part. That's the bit that leads up to Thomas Cromwell's execution. Because Hilary Mantel has created such a sympathetic character, that's very, very difficult. So that's why I haven't read the third one yet, because I think it's just it'll be too very difficult to read, but I might bring myself to it sometime. But Hilary Mantel, what an amazing writer she was. Really, really unique, had a very unique style, and it's very, very sad that we lost her fairly recently. So there you go. If you want to get stuck into a good chunky novel, or the whole trilogy, if you like, over the winter period, I think this is a good one for curling up with. Last book on this list is a book that I read. I started reading it in December of last year and finished it in January of this year. I could not put this book down. Absolutely loved it. Gave it 5 stars. It's right up my street, this. Published in 2012, and this is Advent by James Treadwell. It's the first in a trilogy, and I haven't read the others yet, but I did buy the second in the trilogy right away, so I've got that coming up at some point. So the second one is called Anarchy, and the third one in the series is called Arcadia. Advent, as you can see from the cover, is very, very wintry. Of course, the title kind of gives that away as well. So it's very much a fantasy book, mixing in a little bit of history as well. It's got a sort of parallel dual timeline. The main story occurs in the present day, but it also parallels with 16th century, where we follow the story of Faustus, or Johann Faust, the magician, who has a box that contains the world's magic. Now, in the present day, there is a young boy or teenager, Gavin Stokes, who right from the start we know there's something special about him, because he has these visions of this sort of grey woman, but he's been told it's all in his head, so he doesn't talk about it. At the opening of his story, he's on a train travelling to Cornwall to stay with his aunt. But his aunt doesn't show up at the station, and Gavin has to find his own way to her house, where he finds very strange things happening. Some very strange, fantastical creatures, and this opening world of magic, where Faust's magic is starting to reappear in the world. It's very scary. It's very, very mysterious because for most of the book, you go along like Gavin, sort of reading and thinking, what the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? That's why I couldn't put it down, because it was like, oh my God, what is happening? I just absolutely loved it. This is just so my cup of tea, this book. This dark magic, mystery, and this mix of this sort of ancient history as well. And Gavin he makes a friend in this book as well, and there's his relationship with her, and he has to come face to face with this very dark, dangerous magic that is threatening to take over the world. Not everybody likes this book. I'm not absolutely sure why. I know. I think it may be just one of those books that people either love or hate. And I definitely loved it. And maybe it's a little bit, people have said it's a bit slow at times. Can't see that myself because I kind of raced through it. So there you go. It all depends on your taste, what you like in books. But if you like fantasy, if you like magic, if you like a bit of dark horror, I think this book is for you, definitely. Really, really good one to read over winter, which I did last year. You can also see my review of it if you have a look on my book review playlist. So there you go. The last one on my list, Advent by James Treadwell. Well, hello. There you are. So that's it. That is my winter list for this year. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you find some books in there that you might like to get stuck into over the winter period. And don't forget my reading of A Christmas Carol coming up on the 3rd of December. And if you want to see more winter books, thank you. If you want to see more winter books, then I will put the link to last year's winter book list up here for you. And I think that's it for now. So I don't know what my main video next week will be yet. I'm reading a Rachel Hoare novel. I don't know whether I'll have finished that in time to do a book review. So who knows? There'll be something. Lovely. Did I need a wash? Okay. So there we go. That's it from me and Tilly. I hope you have a lovely week, and I will see you again on Wednesday and again, as usual, on Friday next week. So have a good one and see you soon. Bye for now.